The light in the great convocation chamber of Xylos was a solid thing, a crystalline luminescence that fell in structured pillars from the vaulted geodesic ceiling. It illuminated the facets of the Cathar delegates, their silicate bodies refracting the ambient glow into 1,000 fleeting rainbows. Silence, too, was a physical presence here, a pressure built from the weight of millennia of ordered thought and logical governance. High luminary Xyler stood at the focal point of the chamber, his own form a towering edifice of translucent crystal, the intricate neural lattices within him pulsing with a slow, measured rhythm. Before him, a holographic sphere shimmered, a perfect representation of the void. And within that void hung a single, unsettling anomaly, a vessel of human design. It was a dark, unornamented splinter of a ship, devoid of the sweeping elegance of Cathar resonance cruisers or the brutal, chitinous functionality of Glypton dreadnoughts. It was merely there, a silent, irrefutable fact in the cold calculus of space. For cycles, the convocation had been locked in this state of suspended deliberation. The human expansion, a slow, methodical creep from their distant star, had finally reached the borders of the Cathar protectorate. It was not an invasion. There had been no broadcasts of conquest, no displays of force. The humans simply arrived, established their outposts on worlds deemed uninhabitable by every other known species, and continued their silent journey. They were a paradox, a species whose biology was fragile and chaotic, yet whose technology was stubbornly, inexplicably effective. They were a question mark rendered in flesh and steel, and the unknown was an equation the Cathar mind was not structured to tolerate. The pressure in the chamber finally fractured as Warlord Gorok of the Glypton hegemony shifted his massive, armored frame. The sound was like the grinding of tectonic plates. "This silence is a weapon in itself," Gorok's voice boomed, a guttural transmission that vibrated through the chamber's floor. His holographic avatar, a hulking, insectoid figure with mandibles twitching in agitation, glared at the silent human ship. "They paralyze us with inaction. They seed doubt and dissent with their ambiguity. While we debate their nature, they advance. While we ponder their philosophy, they settle star systems. This is conquest by attrition, a war of nerves we are ill-equipped to fight." He gestured a clawed appendage at the holographic vessel. "We have heard the whispers, the fragmented reports from species on the fringe. Tales of fleets turning back, of scout ships going dark, of commanders petitioning their own high commands to declare entire sectors off-limits after a single encounter with one of their warships. Yet we have no empirical data, no wreckage, no verifiable accounts of aggression. It is a manufactured mystique, a ghost story to frighten lesser minds." Xyler felt the logic of Gorok's argument, a cold, sharp-edged thing. The absence of evidence was not evidence of absence, yet it was also not proof of a threat. The Cathar way was to gather data, analyze, and only then to act. "Warlord Gorok," Xyler's own voice resonated, a series of pure harmonic tones. "Your logic proceeds from an assumption of malice. We have not established intent. The humans have violated no treaties, for none exist between our peoples. They have not encroached upon any sovereign Cathar world. To strike them preemptively would be an act of pure aggression, a cascade of logic built upon a faulty premise." "Logic," Gorok scoffed, the sound a crackle of static. "The universe does not operate on pure logic, luminary. It is a crucible of will and power. The strong survive, the hesitant perish. Your faulty premise is the very nature of life itself. A new predator has entered our hunting grounds. To wait until its fangs are at our throat is not logic, it is suicide." From a darkened alcove, a third voice emerged. It was not broadcast, but simply was. A soft, shimmering presence that coalesced in the mind, the voice of the Oracle of Lyra, an emissary from a species so ancient they were less a political entity and more a geological fact of the galaxy. Their form was a being of woven light, a gentle, shifting nebula of consciousness. "The Glypton sees a predator," the Oracle whispered, the thought echoing in every mind in the chamber. "But what if it is a mirror? What if the silence that follows their passage is not the silence of destruction, but the silence of contemplation? We have heard the tales as well, Warlord, not of fleets destroyed, but of fleets humbled, of commanders who return to their worlds and dismantle their weapons, who forsake conquest for art, who turn their gaze inward. This is not the hallmark of a conventional weapon." Gorok's avatar bristled. "A psychic contagion, then, a weapon of the mind more insidious than any disruptor torpedo. It proves my point. They are a core. Rupting influence, a blight upon the galactic order." Xyler focused his consciousness back on the human ship. It was named the Odyssey, a meaningless term from their chaotic lexicon. His long-range sensors, operating at the very edge of quantum entanglement, could detect its power signature. It was immense, a slumbering volcano of energy, yet it was quiescent. The ship did not radiate heat or aggression. It was cold, still, and patient. The Cathar mind, which saw the universe as a grand, interconnected lattice of cause and effect, struggled to place this piece. The humans did not fit. Their biology was a messy, inefficient soup of organic chemicals, prone to emotion and irrationality. Their societal structures were a constant churn of conflict and cooperation. And yet they had crossed the void. They had built ships that held stars captive in their cores, and they had created a silence that unnerved even the ancient Lumina. The debate raged on, a familiar storm of Glypton aggression, Lumina mysticism, and the cautious, data-driven pragmatism of the other, lesser species of the convocation. Xyler allowed the currents of argument to flow around him, his own thoughts running in deeper, colder streams. He had studied the fragments of human data that had trickled into the galactic archives. Their history was a litany of self-inflicted violence, a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing itself. They had unleashed the power of the atom not on their enemies, but on their own cities. They had crafted plagues in laboratories and spilled oceans of their own blood over scraps of land and intangible ideologies. By all Cathar metrics, they should have annihilated themselves long before they ever reached for the stars. And yet here they were. Had they transcended that nature, or had they simply perfected it, turning that self-destructive impulse outward, cloaking it in a veneer of inscrutable silence? The unbelievable reason even the cleverest aliens steer clear of human warships. The phrase was a recurring fragment from a panicked Xanthan trader's report, now a subject of intense, almost mythical debate in intelligence circles. It was dismissed by the Glyptons as hyperbole. But Xyler, whose mind was a machine for finding patterns, saw not hyperbole, but a variable in an equation he could not yet solve. Stalemate was broken by an urgent chime, a priority signal that cut through the cacophony of the chamber. A new holographic window opened beside the stoic image of the Odyssey. It was a report from the Cathar Deep Range Monitoring Station, Sector 7 Gamma. "High Luminary." The voice of the station commander was tight with controlled alarm, a series of strained, high-frequency tones. "We have lost contact with the scout vessel Stardust Drifter. Its last known position was on a standard survey route. It has entered the exclusion zone declared by the human warship Odyssey." A wave of dissonant energy rippled through the convocation. The theoretical had become concrete. Gorok's avatar slammed a fist into its palm. "They have shown their hand, an act of aggression. The scout is lost, its crew forfeit. Now do you see, Luminary? Now will you act?" Xyler's mind raced, processing the new data. Lost contact did not mean destroyed. There could be 100 reasons for a communication failure, but the correlation was too strong to be a coincidence. He held up a crystalline hand, the gesture commanding silence. The chamber stilled, the expectant energy of 100 worlds focused on him. "An act of aggression requires proof of aggression," Xyler stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The loss of one scout is not justification for a war that could destabilize this galactic arm. We still lack the most critical piece of data, intent, and there is only one way to acquire it." He turned his full attention to the holographic sphere, to the dark ship hanging in the simulated void. "I will lead a delegation, a diplomatic vessel, the Resonance. We will approach the humans. We will open a channel. We will ask for the return of our scout and its crew. And we will, through dialogue and direct observation, finally solve this equation." Gorok let out a hiss of contempt. "Diplomacy? You will be dissected on their laboratory tables, your crystalline mind used as a decorative paperweight." "Resonance is not a defenseless vessel, warlord," Xyler replied, a cold fire pulsing in his neural lattice. "It is the pinnacle of Cathar technology. It is equipped with the most sophisticated sensor suite ever constructed. It can listen to the vibrations of spacetime itself. If there is malice, we will detect it. If there is a threat, we will quantify it. We will not strike from the shadows based on fear and speculation. We will meet them in the light, armed with reason. This is the Cathar way." The oracle of Lyra's light pulsed softly, a silent gesture of assent. The rest of the convocation murmured their agreement. And their fear of the unknown now tempered by the promise of concrete data. Gorok seethed, but he was outvoted. The decision was made. Xyler felt the immense weight of his civilization settle upon him. He was to be the first to deliberately approach a human warship, the first to break the inscrutable silence. He would find the unbelievable reason, or he would become another piece of the mystery. As the convocation formally ratified his mission, his gaze remained fixed on the Odyssey. It waited, patient and silent, like a judgment deferred. The journey of the resonance was a silent passage through folded space, a swift, elegant tear in the fabric of the cosmos. Xyler stood on the command bridge, a vast, circular chamber where the walls were not walls at all, but a seamless 360-degree projection of the starscape outside. The Cathar Bridge was not a place of shouted commands and frantic activity. It was a place of silent communion, where the crew, all crystalline beings like himself, were linked directly to the ship's core consciousness. They were the ship, and the ship was them. Thoughts, commands, and sensor data flowed between them in an intricate, silent dance of pure information. As they transitioned back to normal space, the void outside reformed, and there it was, the Odyssey. It was larger than their sensors had suggested. Not in the brutish, overwhelming way of a Glypton battle carrier, which was designed to intimidate through sheer mass, but in a dense, compact manner. Its hull was a mosaic of dark, non-reflective plating, absorbing the light of the distant nebula and giving nothing back. There were no visible weapon emplacements, no obvious shield emitters, no grand symbols or honorifics. It was the physical embodiment of utilitarianism, a tool built for a purpose it did not feel the need to advertise. And the silence, it was even more profound up close. The resonance's hypersensitive sensors drank in the emissions from the human ship, and what they found was baffling. The ship was alive with energy, its fusion core burning with the fury of a captured sun, its computational systems processing quintillions of cycles per second. Yet it was leaking almost nothing into the void. No stray radiation, no chatter of unsecured communications, no thrum of engines. It was a closed system, a universe unto itself. "They are aware of our presence, High Luminary," transmitted his second-in-command, Lyran, his own crystal form shimmering to Xyler's right. "Their energy signature shifted fractionally upon our arrival. They are observing us with a passive sensor array of a design I do not recognize." "Maintain our position," Xyler projected. "Broadcast a standard greeting on all universal frequencies. Identify ourselves as a diplomatic envoy from the Cathar Protectorate. State that our purpose is peaceful inquiry regarding the status of our missing scout vessel, the Stardust Drifter." The command was executed. A stream of pure mathematical language, the lingua franca of the galaxy, was beamed towards the silent ship. For a long moment that stretched into an eternity, there was no reply. The silence deepened, becoming a tangible force pressing against the resonance's shields. Xyler felt a flicker of something his people had long since engineered out of their consciousness, apprehension. Gorok's words echoed in his mind. A ghost story to frighten lesser minds. Was he being foolish? Had he brought his crew, his ship, the hope of his people, into the jaws of a trap laid with terrifying patience? Then a response came. It was not on the universal frequencies. It was a direct, focused transmission, a needle of information aimed precisely at their primary comms receptor. It was not in the sterile language of mathematics, but in the Cathar's own complex harmonic tongue. The pronunciation was flawless. "This is Captain Eva Rostova of the United Terran Confederation Vessel Odyssey. We acknowledge your greeting, High Luminary Xyler. Your vessel is a work of profound beauty." The voice was unexpected. It was a biological voice, female by human standards, but it carried none of the chaotic emotional resonance Xyler had anticipated from studying their species. It was calm, impossibly calm. It was the voice of someone looking at a storm from a place of perfect shelter. The compliment about their ship was also disarming. It was not flattery. It was stated as a simple, objective observation, an aesthetic appreciation that was both surprising and unsettling. Xyler gathered his thoughts, marshaling the cool logic that defined his being. "Captain Rostova, your mastery of our language is impressive. We are here to inquire about our scout ship, the Stardust Drifter. Its last known trajectory brought it into this sector. We have since lost all contact. Can you provide us with any information?" Another pause, shorter this time. "The Stardust Drifter is not destroyed, High Luminary. Its crew is alive and unharmed. The V. Essel came within our designated security perimeter and initiated an unauthorized deep scan of our ship systems. In accordance with UFC protocol, its drive and communication systems were temporarily neutralized. The vessel and its crew are currently under quarantine for observation." The relief that washed through Xyler was immediately followed by a cold spike of alarm. Neutralized. The Stardust Drifter, while only a scout, was equipped with state-of-the-art Cathar stealth and evasion technology. For it to be so effortlessly incapacitated was a chilling revelation. And the reason, an unauthorized scan. It was a minor transgression, a breach of etiquette, not an act of hostility. The human response seemed disproportionate. "Under quarantine?" Xyler pressed, keeping his own tone perfectly level. "Captain, a deep scan is a standard reconnaissance procedure. It is not an act of aggression. To disable our ship for such a reason is an extreme measure." "For your people, perhaps," the human captain's voice returned, still maddeningly calm. "For us, it is a matter of absolute necessity. Our warships are sovereign territory, high luminary. More than that, they are sanctuaries. The integrity of their systems is paramount. An unauthorized intrusion is not a slight we can afford to tolerate." Sanctuaries, the word was incongruous. This dark, silent vessel radiating enough power to crack a continent was a sanctuary. The paradox of the humans deepened. Xyler's mission was to acquire data, and it was clear that simple conversation would not suffice. The answer, the real answer, was inside that ship. He had to know. The convocation had to know. He authorized a subtle, deeply layered probe. It was not a weapon, not even a scan in the conventional sense. It was a tendril of pure consciousness, woven into the diplomatic handshake protocol they were establishing, designed to slide past firewalls and taste the data streams within the human ship's core. A whisper of a touch to understand the nature of their systems. Lyran's form flickered with a query, a silent question about the wisdom of such an action after the captain's explicit warning. Xyler overrode him. The need for data outweighed the risk. "Captain Rostova," Xyler transmitted, beginning the formal diplomatic exchange that would mask the probe. "We understand the need for security. However, we must insist on the immediate release of our ship and crew. Their continued detainment could be construed as a hostile act by the Cathar Protectorate." "There is no hostility intended, Luminary," the voice replied. And it was in that exact moment, as the human spoke of peace, that Xyler's probe made contact. It did not hit a firewall. There was no shield, no countermeasure, no burst of static or defensive algorithm. The probe simply connected, and the universe ended. For Xyler, a being whose entire existence was the serene, ordered flow of crystalline thought, the experience was a cataclysm. It was not data that flooded his mind. It was sensation. It was emotion. It was raw, unfiltered, agonizing experience. He was standing in mud, cold water seeping into boots he did not have, a primitive rifle in hands of flesh and bone. The sky was gray, torn by smoke and the screams of dying men. The air stank of cordite, iron, and fear. It was a place called the Somme. He was a young man, barely more than a boy, watching his friends, his brothers, dissolve into red mist and shattered bone. The feeling was not an observation, it was his own. The terror, the grief, the hopeless, soul-crushing despair, it flooded the perfect, logical architecture of his mind. The vision shattered, replaced by another. He was a woman running through a burning city of paper and wood. The sky was on fire. A sun, a terrible, man-made sun, had bloomed in the morning, and now the world was ash and shadows burned into stone. The loss was a physical weight, the memory of a child's hand slipping from her own in the chaos. Hiroshima. The name was a scar on his consciousness. Again, it shifted. The biting cold of a Russian winter, the taste of sawdust in bread, the gnawing hunger, the animalistic desperation, the endless, grinding siege of a city called Stalingrad. He felt the frostbite in his phantom limbs, the burning hatred for an unseen enemy, the slow, agonizing death of a civilization trapped in ice and fire. Genocide, famine, the quiet horror of a political prison, the roaring inferno of a tank battle in a desert, the cold, sterile terror of a plague unleashed. A billion moments of suffering, from the grand, historic tragedies to the small, personal agonies of a single soldier bleeding out in a forgotten jungle, thinking of a home he would never see again. It was the complete, unabridged history of human violence, and it was not a record. It was a living memory, a wound that never healed. On the bridge of the resonance, chaos erupted. The other Cathar crew members, linked to Xyler's probe, were experiencing T2, their crystalline forms flickered and dimmed, their internal light sputtering as if starved of energy. Some collapsed, their physical structures unable to contain the sheer psychic trauma. Lyran was on his knees, his perfect form shuddering, a silent scream of pure thought echoing through the ship's consciousness. They were beings of order, and they had just been submerged in an ocean of absolute, meaningless chaos. Xyler, through sheer force of will, pulled back, severing the connection. The psychic backlash was immense, like tearing a limb from his own soul. He fell to his knees, his own form trembling violently. The silence of his mind was gone, replaced by the lingering screams of a million battlefields, the weeping of a billion ghosts. He looked at his own crystalline hands, and for the first time in his existence, he understood the concept of blood. The voice of Captain Eva Rostova returned, and this time the perfect calm was gone. It was not replaced with triumph or anger, but with a deep, ancient, and profound sadness. It was the voice of a people who lived with this every day. "We warned you, High Luminary," she said softly, the sorrow in her voice a universe in itself. "We told you it was a sanctuary. You were not trying to hack a weapons system. You were trying to break into a tomb, a memorial. What you have just experienced is a fraction of a single % of our history. We call it the Ethelberg Archive. Every one of our warships carries it. It is not a weapon. It is a conscience. It is the totality of our regret, the full measure of our species' capacity for cruelty, preserved in perfect, agonizing fidelity. It is a reminder of the hell we created for ourselves, the hell we crawled out of, and the hell we will never, ever inflict upon another living soul." Xyler finally understood. He understood the silence. He understood the humbled fleets and the contemplative commanders. To raise a weapon against a human warship was not to invite retaliation. It was to be forced to share their burden. To look into their eyes was to see your own capacity for violence reflected in the mirror of their past. The unbelievable reason aliens steered clear of human warships was not because they were powerful. It was because they were wounded. And their wounds were so deep, so terrible that they had become the ultimate shield. To fight them, you first had to endure their pain, and no one, no species was strong enough for that. The return to Xylos was a journey through a muted gray reality. The vibrant colors of the cosmos, once a source of analytical fascination for Xyler, now seemed faded, their light thin and meaningless against the raging crimson memories burned into his mind. The perfect, harmonic silence of his Cathar crew was gone, replaced by a fractured, troubled stillness. They were all changed. They had touched the human archive, and it had left an indelible stain upon their orderly consciousness. They had been given a glimpse into the soul of another species, and that soul was a tapestry of sublime brilliance and absolute horror. When the resonance arrived, the convocation was already assembled, the chamber humming with anxious, impatient energy. Warlord Gorok's avatar was pacing, a caged predator, his contempt a palpable force. As Xyler's own avatar materialized at the focal point, a wave of queries and demands washed over him. He let them break against the newfound stillness within him, a stillness born not of peace, but of shock. "Luminary," Gorok's voice boomed. "Report, were you attacked? Is the crew of the Stardust Drifter alive? What tricks did the primitives employ?" Xyler raised his head. The light of the chamber no longer seemed pure. It seemed to cast shadows he had never noticed before. He looked at Gorok, at the other delegates, at their certainty, their arrogance, their ignorance. They were like children playing with fire with no concept of what it meant to be burned. "There was no attack." Xyler's voice was different now. The pure, harmonic tones were still there, but they were layered with something else, a dissonance, a note of sorrow that had never been part of the Cathar emotional spectrum. "The crew of the Stardust Drifter is alive. They are being returned to us. The humans employed no tricks." "Then what happened?" Gorok demanded. "Why this delay? Why does your energy signature feel so distorted?" Xyler took a long moment, gathering his thoughts, trying to find the words, the concepts to explain the inexplicable. How could he describe the color red to a being who had only ever seen in shades of blue? "We have operated under a flawed assumption," he began, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that silenced the chamber. "We sought to classify humanity as a predator, a competitor, or a threat. We tried to fit them into our known categories of galactic life. We were wrong. They are none of those things. They are a warning." He extended a crystalline hand, and a new holographic display shimmered into existence above him. It was not a chart or a tactical schematic. It was a swirling, chaotic vortex of light and shadow, a visual representation of the raw, unstructured data he had absorbed from the Ethelberg archive. "We believed their warships were fortresses. They are not. They are memorials. We believed their silence was a strategy. It is not. It is a state of mourning." He began to speak, to describe what he had seen, what he had felt. He spoke of trenches filled with mud and blood, of cities turned to glass, of the quiet, methodical cruelty of ideologies run rampant. He did not just list facts. He conveyed the emotions, the terror, the grief, the shame. The very air in the chamber grew heavy, the crystalline structures seeming to weep as they refracted the chaotic light of his display. He told them of the Ethelberg archive, of a species that had weaponized its own conscience, that had turned its history of suffering into a shield more potent than any energy field. "To attack them," Xyler concluded, his voice barely a whisper yet carrying to every corner of the vast hall, "is not to risk destruction. It is to risk understanding. It is to be flooded with the absolute, irrefutable knowledge of what war truly is, stripped of all its glory, all its strategic logic, all its political justification. It is to feel the pain of every victim, the regret of every killer. The reason no one engages their warships is that you cannot win a fight against a species that has already conquered its own worst demons. You can only be consumed by them. A profound silence descended, deeper than any that had come before. Gorok's avatar was frozen, his mandibles hanging agape. The logic of violence, the calculus of power that had defined his entire existence, had been rendered meaningless. How do you threaten a people whose greatest deterrent is the offer to share their own agony? It was the Oracle of Lyra who spoke first, their nebula of light pulsing with a soft, compassionate glow. "They do not carry weapons," the Oracle whispered into their minds. "They carry the memory of what weapons do. It is the final stage of wisdom for a warlike species, to not forget the cost." Gorok finally found his voice, though it was a choked, rasping sound. "A trick, a psychic illusion, a lie to make us weak." But his words lacked conviction. He had seen the change in Xylar, had felt the profound disturbance in the energy of the Cathar delegation. It was not a lie. It was a truth too terrible to be invented. The vote was a formality. The motion was not for war nor for containment. It was for a formal extension of dialogue, for an alliance. Not an alliance born of mutual threat or strategic advantage, but one born of a staggering, humbling respect. The Cathar, the logical, ordered beings of crystal, sought an alliance with the chaotic, emotional, scarred beings of flesh and blood. They had sought to understand a tactical mystery and had instead discovered a moral absolute. As the convocation began the slow, formal process of drafting the treaty, a private channel opened in Xylar's mind. It was Captain Eva Rostova. Her mental voice was as clear as it had been before, but now he could sense the layers beneath the calm, the weariness, the immense burden of her command. "High Luminary Xylar," she began. "I have been authorized to share something with you, a clarification. You believe the archive is a deterrent, a shield to protect us from the aggression of others. You are correct, but that is not its primary purpose." Xylar's focus sharpened. "What is its primary purpose, Captain?" "It is a sensor," Rostova replied. "A receiver. We learned that great suffering, acts of violence on a planetary or systemic scale leave an echo, a psychic scar on the fabric of spacetime. The archive, being a repository of our own self-inflicted scars, is uniquely tuned to detect these echoes. It allows us to see the ghosts of long-dead wars." A cold, logical curiosity peaked within Xylar. "You are galactic archaeologists, then, studying the conflicts of the past?" "Sometimes," Rostova said, and the weight in her voice intensified. "But the Odyssey was not drawn to this sector by an echo from the past. We are here because the archive detected a new one that has not happened yet." The conceptual impossibility of the statement struck Xylar, a future event. "Causality," he began, the very foundations of his logical universe trembling. "Is not as linear as we would like to believe," she finished for him. "The echo is faint, but it is growing stronger. It is not Cathar, it is not Glypton, it is not human, it is something else, something vast. We have cross-referenced the signal's trajectory with deep-field observations. There is a pattern. In the direction of the signal's origin across millions of light-years of space, there is a profound and unnatural emptiness. A swath of the galaxy where there are no complex radio nals, no industrial signatures, no signs of advanced civilization where there should be thousands. Just a corridor of silence. The word, once a symbol of human mystery, now took on a far more terrifying meaning." Rostova continued, her voice now stripped of all but a grim, professional solemnity. "For a long time, we had a theory to explain why the galaxy seemed so empty. We called it the Great Filter. The idea that all civilizations reach a point where they destroy themselves. We believed we had passed our filter, that our endless wars were our great test. We were wrong. The archive was not built just to stop us from starting new wars. It was built to prepare us for the one we knew was coming. The one that must be fought." On Xylar's private display, Captain Rostova sent him a data file. It was not another flood of agonizing memory. It was a single, terrifyingly clear signal, isolated from the cosmic background radiation. It was not a language. It was not a warning. It was the sound of a trillion souls screaming as their reality was unmade. A death cry from a civilization so ancient it predated the Cathar, an echo of a final moment of absolute terror that was now washing over them from the future. "That is the echo," Rostova's voice was grim. "That is the filter, And it is heading our way. We did not come here to conquer your space, luminary. We came here looking for allies. Xyler stared at the signal at the sound of a galaxy dying. He looked at the vast, stardusted map of their reality, and he saw the encroaching, silent void that Rostova spoke of. The petty squabbles of the convocation, the Glypton's lust for power, the Cathar's obsession with logic. It all evaporated like mist in the face of this absolute, existential dread. He had sought the unbelievable reason aliens steered clear of human warships, and he had found it. They were not to be feared for the wars they had fought, but for the war they were preparing for, a war against the silence that was coming to consume them all. His new, fragile understanding of suffering was not a weakness. It was the only thing that could prepare him for what was next. The alliance with humanity was no longer a matter of politics or philosophy. It was the only hope for survival.